Welcome to Rick's Scale Model Fix and part 5 of Kinetic's 1/48 scale Harrier Gr3 step-by-step video build. In this part we're going to be concentrating on some of the smaller ancillary items in the kit, such as the weapons, the exhaust nozzles and the undercarriage drop tanks and the like, in preparation for adding the decals later. I've already made a start off camera to the exhaust nozzles, and as you can see on the bench there, we've got the various shades of the metallic paint that I used to create the effect. It's worthy of noting at this point about Harrier nozzles. So the rear nozzles are referred to the hot nozzles at the back of the under the wing, at the back of the airframe, and the cold nozzles are at the front. And these can be various colours, so please check the reference of the aircraft that you're modelling. They can range from dark green to pale metal. So these have all been painted up now, and hopefully the camera can sort of pick those up. So they're the heat shields. So they're in the basic colours. They need a bit of gloss coat before a wash is applied. So just clear those out of the way. Well, we had the camouflage colours out in the last section. I've painted up the aid and gun pods, the flaps and centerline pylons. So we've still got quite a bit to do before we get to the decals. So we've got to paint the drop tanks, we've got the pylons inboard and outboard, along with the launch rails for the sidewinders, depending on the version that you're modelling. It's just worth noting, while we were talking about pylons there, and just clarifying a little bit about what the kit actually contains. So this is a section that could catch you out if you're not paying attention to the instructions. So in section 18 it sees us building the pylons up, and we've looked at that in a previous episode of this video. There are different pylons in the kit, so please make sure that you're using the right parts as outlined in section 18 here. There is a difference between Sea Harrier and RAF Harrier pylons, as can be seen here. So the pylon on the right hand side has got the kinked or cut off leading edge, and that is only applicable to Sea Harriers. So please make sure you're fitting the right one to the model. It is clearly identified in the instruction booklet, and it's the one that's got the straight slanting leading edge that's required for this build. So the next job on the cutting mat today is to just add a little bit of detail to these pylons. So in the previous episode we saw us build these up. Now the inboard ones are going to have the drop tanks attached, so you're not going to see this rather bland lower surface. So they're quite are acceptable as they are. They're going to have the sway braces attached, and then the tank will be in place like so. So they need painting dark green for this version of the kit. However, I'm undecided as to what I might put on the outboard pylons. So what I've done is I've gone through the spares box and I've dragged up an old part used fret. This is actually for the T4 T8 Harrier, and because I had the pylons all loaded up on that kit, I'd still got the etch parts that add the detail to the undersurface of the pylon. So they're slightly oversized, they are a little big. So what we've done is we've glued the sway braces in place, and then using super glue we've attached the brass item to the pylon, and then we've sanded down using a Tamiya diamond file for etch parts, and also a rough medium side of the Flory Model sanding sponge, just to make sure that there's no lip around the edge of the plastic. There's still a seam visible, so reaching for our trusty Mr. Surfacer, we're just going to add a bead just around where the brass meets the plastic, like so, and this will be allowed to dry, and then we'll remove it like we did while we were filling the wing fuselage joint, and it just leaves an invisible joint between the etch and the plastic of the pylon when viewed from the side, so that you don't see that the etch part is stuck onto the surface. So that will need to dry before it's removed. I've already done the other pylon, which you can see there is got some detail. The mounting pins for the stores will be cut off if I'm not going to use those. So I've just got the centre pylon to do. Again, I've not totally decided on what I'm going to put on the centre pylon at the moment, so I shall have a think about that and do that later on. If I decide to have it empty, I'll add the etch part, it's there and ready. So that's another job done. So we need to start getting these in paint, along with things like the undercarriage doors, canopy frame and sill, and then we can look at adding the decals and bringing it all together to complete the build. Next on the to-do list is the undercarriage. So the Harrier is quite unique, as in it has nose gear, main gear, centerline fuselage and an outrigger on the end of each wingtip. I'm not a great fan of the way Kinetic go about making the wheels, but nonetheless they work. So we've got 2 tyre halves and a centre wheel hub, like so. And wheel hub, if the camera will pick that up, wheel hub detail is okay. So we've cleaned the bits up already, and it's simply a case of sandwiching the hub between the 2 tyre halves, and then with a bit of quick set run round the joint, we can try and get it as round as possible. About there, before finishing off. The nose gear is the same, so we'll put that to one side for a second. So with the one that I've already made up is now dry, and we're just going to have to sand this centre seam off. So using a Flory Dual medium sander, using the rough side, we're just going to gently take that seam away, get the majority of it done. We don't want to cause any flat spots, unless of course you want a weighted sort of appearance to your wheels. So once we've worked our way round the entirety of the wheel, we're going to use the sponge side to just sand the sand marks out, so to speak. So the beauty of using the sponge side is that it conforms to the shape of the object you're sanding, and then it doesn't induce any flat spots. So I'll just give that a good going over. So we've got a few little divots there. They can be filled with Mr. Surfacer, but generally they're not too bad. So the one that I've just glued, might as well do that one. So we're going to take the joint line out, just sanding at 45 degrees across the seam for the, and just see what that looks like. Clear the sanding. There we are. And there's missed a bit there. And then using the polisher side, Just going to clean that joint line up. So I'm doing this a little bit quick, the glue's not quite fully dried, so it is tearing a little bit. And then we can paint the wheels and get them mounted to the undercarriage legs. Now it is possible to squeeze the main gear leg between the forks with care, but you need to just make sure that you don't destroy your paint on your wheel as it goes in. There we go. And I'm just going to add a little bit more cement around this one, just because we were a little bit quick. I don't want to compromise the joint. We have got a bit of a seam there. Okay, so that's that one. So moving on to the nose gear. So just cleaning the sprue attachment stubs up, just cutting them off with a scalpel, and then the same with the hub. Making sure that it fits. And then sandwiching it between the two. I think there's various aftermarket resin wheels out there at the moment. They are quite expensive. But for those of you perhaps want to go down that route, they do offer a little bit more detail in the kit parts. So we'll just set that one aside to dry. We're just going to now build up the nose gear leg. So parts E42 and E41. So we've got some sprue attachment points to remove again, so I'm just going to cut them off with a knife. And these two are then sandwiched, glued together like so. So again, it's worth noting here, dry fitting, that the parts don't quite go together, so we just need to reduce the height of this location pin. It's still a little bit proud there. I might just remove that, to be honest. Remove that one altogether. Let's see if that's improved things. We've got those up there to locate that. Yeah, there we go. So we're going to need a little bit of thinner filler on there. I'm just going to trim a small amount of flash of the axle for the nose gear wheel, and then basically the nose gear wheel goes in there like so, and that's the completed unit. So I'll glue these together now. Like I said, you can fit the wheel through the axle carefully, but make sure your paint's fully dry, otherwise you'll scratch the freshly painted wheel. So I'm just going to flood this area now with some quick set Harrier glue. And once that's dry, cleanup will be minimal. So in contrast to the multi-part nose gear, the main gear is moulded as one part. And we're just going to clean up the attachment point to that. The landing gear can be added to the model at the end of the build, but to assist getting all 5 wheels to touch the ground, it's worthy at this point to just remove the mounting pins for this wheel, and then what that allows you to do is to slide this up and down in the main gear well, so that once you've got the outriggers on and the nose gear, you can just adjust the height of this so that the main gear is also touching the ground. So we'll put that to one side and we'll look at the outriggers. So with the outriggers, there's 2 sets contained in the kit. There's 2 on the new sprue and 2 on the older sprue which was found in the Sea Harriers. So it's worthy of noting that the Sea Harrier kits have, I don't know if you can see this on camera, tie down hooks moulded in just where the tip of the knife blade is there, whilst the new outriggers on the sprue, including the fuselage sprue, sprue N, including the noses and the stuff for the GR series, doesn't. So as you can see there, which is a nice little touch from Kinetic. However, just be mindful that land-based Harriers, GRs particularly, didn't have the tie-down ring unless they were embarked in the Falklands conflict when they were on the aircraft carrier. So just be mindful of which one that you actually want to depict. It's a small detail, no one's going to really notice. I'm going to go with the newer outriggers because they're better moulded, and the aircraft I'm depicting was land-based, so we'll just remove those from the sprue. There we go, so a bit more clean up. There's some nice notes on the instructions to help the modeller, so it's worth referring to those, having a read. So it's saying for the outrigger colours, rubber tyres, light grey for the hubs and oleos, and the marking option colour scheme is appropriate for the covers. And it says no, the rear outrigger cuff, which when retracted is level with the upper surface of the wing, is painted dark green. All marking options. So there's quite a bit of painting to do with these outriggers. As I said, the wheels are moulded solid. Whilst it's a pain in the backside to paint, it does add strength. And just clean up any mould seam lines on the parts there. I think if you looking at Haddad Canopy mask set, I think it includes masks for these wheels as well, so we'll just clean those up. So again, there's decals to add to these. I've just noticed a very small ejector pin on the oleo there. That's going to need filling, unless it's on the blind side on the inside of the airframe, in which case we'll leave it. So I'll just trim that's off there, just to make sure that they're the same height, so we don't have any issues when we come to fit them to the wings. There you go. Just looking at the instruction booklet, it's also notable there that the main gear doors are open. Very seldom seen on the ground with the doors open, so they are closed, given that they also have a very slight droop, so it might be worth just sort of fixing them at a sort of angle just to portray that, cut the hinges off just to be totally accurate there. And we've not even looked at the air brake yet, and that's to come, so we'll paint that in a different section. So we really are drawing to conclusion to the major parts of the build now. So the wheels are done, the undercarriage is done, that just needs set aside and painting. The drop tanks need painting, the pylons and the weaponry needs painting. So join me back at the bench when I've done that, and we'll go through what's left to do. But it's looking as though we're marching into the interesting bit where we put the decals on. So there's a lot going on at the workbench at the moment with the Harrier build, but we've just got to the stage where we're going to paint the wheel hubs and the undercarriage parts. So for this we're using Humbrol 196, which is recommended in the kit instruction booklet. This paint is very thick, so there's going to need considerable thinning in it to spray in the airbrush. Let's just get my piece of foam. So we're going to spray the outriggers first. Let's just add, just to speed things up, I'm just going to add a couple of drops of dryer to this Humbrol paint. Check in the flow, and then so it's just spraying all the parts that the undercarriage, including the wheel hubs and the forks. A nice layer of paint on there. You're going to have some wonderful masking to do with this. To do this for all the undercarriage parts. That's the main gear leg. Nose gear leg. Making sure we get into all the nooks and crannies, all the angles. I'll just move those out the way now to dry, and we'll turn our attention to the wheel hubs. So work continues apace with the Kinetic Harrier Gr3. So the next job that I've done just off camera was to paint the rear decking for the Canopy. So this sits in here. I can do it. So it slots in between the cutout and the intakes. So, and I've just got the camouflage pattern up and over the canopy frame to match the fuselage. Then using Tamiya masking tape, the main canopy section was masked and again painted at the same time, and that'll slip on there like that, and everything lines up thankfully. And then the final step in that was to mask up again the front canopy, the windscreen, which will sit perfectly in place on the front of the model. So the good news is if you want your canopy closed, it's a perfect fit. So all that we need to do now is to put some matte varnish onto that canopy before we remove the masking. So the undercarriage units have now been worked on and completed. These will be added at the end of the build. So the Humbrol 196 that we saw being sprayed on is now thoroughly dried, and we've had a Flory Models dark dirt wash diluted a little bit and just added to give a sense of depth to the detail and make them look a little bit used rather than shiny and new. The main gear hub detail was painted and again allowed to dry before that Flory wash was added, and to achieve a really nice hub without too much effort in masking or hand painting, we just selected the corresponding hole from one of these plastic templates and sprayed through, leaving the result as such. So they'll be added to the model once it's completed to avoid risk of damage. So just to finish off part 5, we're now going to just give the clear canopy parts, the framing, a matte coat before we remove the masking. So we're going to use Mr. Colour UV Cut GX113 super clear matte, and we're just holding the parts on a cocktail stick just to so we're not handling them, and we just build it up in a light layer. So as long as we spray away from the open edge of the cockpit, we'll be fine. We'll not get any overspray on the inside. There we go. So we're just going to pop a new knife blade in the scalpel, and that varnish is now nice and dry. So before we remove these canopy masks, we're just going to pop that knife blade just under the mask, and then with a pair of tweezers, once that corner's been lifted, we're just going to carefully remove, pulling it away from the painted edge. So just getting the blade under the edge of the mask and pulling it away. Under the edge of the mask. I'm just pulling it away. So the windscreen wiper on this canopy is going to just need touching in by hand, and that is done. So that can be added to the model after the final painting stages, and we'll just unmask the rear section. So the rear section is quite brittle, it feels quite brittle, so don't place too much pressure on it, otherwise the inevitable could happen. So the joy of using the Guns product is it's pretty much dry enough to handle within a few minutes. And there we go. So just slide these in place properly, just for a sort of sneak peek. And there we go. Can't tip it up too much, but it's worth noting that the micro detonation code, or the MDC, is etched onto the inside of the canopy. I don't know if the camera can pick that up, and it's actually quite nice, so we don't need to do anything to that. So that draws a conclusion to part 5 of the Kinetic 1/48 scale Harrier Gr3 build. So in part 6 we're going to be looking at adding the decals. We've now completed all the smaller sundry items that seem to take forever to complete towards the end of the build. So until next time, please take care and look after yourselves and stay well.